So the graph that we're looking at here is US retail sales of video games over a period of years from 2000 to 2009. And we're going to identify and talk about quite a few things going on with this graph. First, we're going to talk about where the graph is positive and negative. Then we're going to talk about where the graph is increasing and decreasing. We're going to talk about something called relative extrema. And then finally, we're going to discuss what is known as end behavior. Okay, so let's begin with positive and negative. And when we talk about positive and negative parts of a graph, what we mean is where are the spots where the graph is above the x-axis and where are the spots where the graph is below the x-axis. So anything that is above the x-axis is a spot where we consider the graph to be positive. So anything up here is a positive part of this graph. Anything that I shaded right there in red is positive. And so we would say that the graph is positive between, and then let's just look and see. We're going to use our x coordinates, spots where it's positive. So this point right here is where it starts to be positive. So it looks like we have a negative x there because our origin is right here. So it's a negative x. It looks like it's a little lower than negative zero point 0.5. Let's call that like maybe negative zero point 0.6, negative zero point 0.7, something like that. Let's call it negative zero point 0.6. Negative zero point 0.7 will be fine too. So say it's from negative zero point 0.6, between negative zero point 0.6 and where does it go back negative? That's about right there. What does that look like? A little bit less than 10.5. Let's call it like 10.3. There we go. So we're going to say that this graph is positive between negative zero point 0.6 and 10.3. That's all the spots where this graph is above the x-axis. So that means it's negative all the other spots. Well, once we know where it's positive, negative is pretty easy. It's everything else. So it's negative on this piece right here. So that's when x was lower than negative zero point 0.6. And it's going to be negative here on the end also, which is when x is more than 10.3. There we go, positive and negative. It's positive between negative zero point 0.6 and 10.3, and it's negative when it's below negative zero point 0.6 or above 10.3. Great. Okay, let's talk about increasing and decreasing next. So increasing means where are the spots where it's literally going up, and decreasing means where is it going down. So it's going up from here all the way to about right there, and that's where it starts to dip back down. And then it starts increasing again to right there. So those are the spots where the graph is increasing. And then the rest of the time, the graph is going down. So we're going to say it's increasing. And so where is it increasing there? It looks like to about this point right here. That's a little bit more than 1.5, it looks like. It looks like maybe the x is, I'm going to call that 1 point, let's say 1.8. So we're going to say it's increasing. And the way we word this is kind of weird. We say increasing for x is less than 1.8. And it's also increasing between here and here. So where are these points? This is a little bit more than 3. So we'll say between x equals, I'm going to call that like 3.2. And there's this x right here. That looks like a little bit more than 8, so we'll say like 8 point, what do you think, 8.2, 8.3? Let's just call it 8.2. Oops, I forgot my x equals. Oops. And x equals 8.2. Okay, it's decreasing everywhere else then. There are no spots where it's flat. So we're going to say it's decreasing between, and let me change to a lighter blue here so maybe it's easier to see. It's decreasing, ooh, that might be too light. Let's go with like a, oh, that's a pretty looking blue. It's decreasing right here. So that's from 1.8 to 3.2 were the numbers we used. So between 1.8 and 3.2, those were the numbers we used for those cutoff points. And it's also decreasing right here, which is from 8.2 on. So we'll say and for x is greater than 8.2. And those are spots where it's decreasing. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about relative extrema. And relative extrema mean minimums and maximums, meaning high points and low points for our graph. And so our relative extrema here, we're going to look for maximums and minimums. And once you have done spots where it's increasing or decreasing, maxima and minima, and those are the plurals, by the way, maxima and minima, maxima and minima are the plurals of maximum and minimum. If you said maximums and minimums, nobody would get mad at you. Those are fine. Those are really easy to find, though, the maxima and minima, because it's the spots where it changes from increasing to decreasing. So we had one right here, we had one right here, and we had one right here. The spots where it changes from increasing to decreasing, which would be this one and this one, those are going to be maxima. So we've got two of those. We've got one at 1.8, and we've got another one at 8.2. And we know those are the numbers because those are the ones we've been using. We used 8.2 and 1.8 as our estimations. And then we're actually going to have to change our wording here because we only have one minimum, not multiple. We have one minimum, and it's right here. One minimum at, and then 3.2 was the number that we used for those. One minimum at 3.2. Okay, and then the last thing that we're talking about is end behavior. And the end behavior means literally what is happening on the ends of the graph. Well, there are two ends of the graph. There's the left end and the right end. So let's start with the right end right here. What is happening on this end of the graph? And this is the end of the graph as x is increasing. As x gets bigger, what happens to y? Well, as we move to the right of the graph, meaning as x gets bigger, the graph goes down. So we'll say as x increases, this means as we go to the right, as x increases, y decreases. Because if I move to the right of the graph, it goes down. Y is decreasing. What happens on the other end? As I go to the other direction, meaning as x decreases, the graph is also going down. If I move to the left, the graph also goes down. So as x decreases, y decreases. In other words, if I move to the graph like we're used to moving on the graph, if I move from left to right, if I move in this direction, the graph goes down. But if I read the graph backwards, from right to left, the graph is also going down. The graph is going down on both ends of the graph. It's going down. So y is decreasing whether x is increasing or whether x is decreasing. The graph is going down. And so that was a lot of things we did with this graph. We talked about where it was positive and negative. That's where it's above or below the x-axis. We talked about where it was increasing or decreasing. That means where's the graph going up and where's the graph going down. The maximum and the minimum are spots where the graph changes from increasing to decreasing. And then finally, the end behavior means what is happening on the left end of the graph and the right end of the graph.